So call the regular meeting of Township Council for Monday, September 9th to order. Of course, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and in particular, acknowledge our valued relationships with the Katzie, Kwantlen, Matsqui, and Semiahmoo First Nations. I hope everybody had a great, restful summer. I think I'd like to try that, we pay more attention to some elements of the council procedure bylaw coming up here for the remaining 2 years and a bit. Try to stress a bit more some decorum. I've talked to a couple members of council about that. Maybe try to dial down the rudeness we've seen on occasion. I'm certainly going to do my part to try to do that. I think we've seen some negative interactions here in council, and I think after a reflective summer, I'd like to do what I can to try to keep that to a minimum and try to debate the policy and not the people. So hopefully all members of council will help us all assist each other in those efforts moving forward. I understand, Ms. Bauer, that delegation C2 has been withdrawn. So with that, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda amended to remove C2, moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Van Popta? Is there any other discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll call the question on A1. That carries unanimously. Get a motion to adopt the meeting minutes from the regular council meeting of July 15th, moved by Councillor Rent, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Discussion, call the question on B1. That carries unanimously. A motion to adopt the public hearing meeting minutes of July 15, moved by Councillor Rent, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Call the question on B2. That carries unanimously. First item is the delegation C1 from David Johnson. Is he here? Oh, please come forward. Just introduce yourself for council and then go ahead.
My name is Dave Johnson, and I'm here to represent Skate Undercover to talk to you today about the need for more dry, safe, undercover spaces for skateboarders, scooters, and rollerblades. Thank you so much, Mayor Woodward and council members and members of the public. My name's Dave, as I mentioned. I'm a professional skateboarder, and I get to travel the world and skate among some of the top skaters in the world. And this past year, I got to achieve my goal of skating something called Tampa Pro, which is one of the world's largest skateboard competitions. And in that run, that 90-second run, I did a trick called a crooked grind nollie kickflip out. And I'm sure all of you guys know what that is. I learned those tricks that I performed in parking garages across the Tri-Cities. In Port Moody City Hall, I learned a crooked grind. At Newport Village, I learned a crooked grind nollie kickflip out. Now I'm a father, and just a couple of years ago, I brought my son to the Superstore parking garage because my son wanted to go skateboarding and it was raining. And my son, Jethro, he looked at me and he said, "Dad, what are we doing here?" And I said, "We're skateboarding." "Of course we are." He says, "Dad, why are we skateboarding in a parking garage?" And that's when it dawned on me. It was like there was an aha moment. And here I was so used to inhaling carbon dioxide and dodging cars and, shopping carts, that it was almost like the smudge on the wall that I had forgotten was there. And my son looks at me and he says, "Dad, why are we in a parking garage skateboarding?" Well, that's all there is. Aside from possibly a small portion of the Plaza Skate Park downtown and, of course, the Cloverdale Skate Park in Surrey. And so from that moment onwards, I began to have conversations with people like yourself, people who are people of influence, to highlight the need of the fact that 50% of the year, Langley gets rained on. And during that time, I think we need to be creating spaces for our youth to be able to skateboard, scooter, maybe even basketball, parkour, in as many places as possible. And there's a recreational deficit all across the Lower Mainland. And it's this: we don't have enough dry, undercover spaces for our youth to use for half of the year. And we live in one of the richest, wettest climates in all of North America. And listen, one of the things I love to do is I love to bring down skateboards to Mexico. This past year, we brought 16 skateboards and a crew down, and we taught skateboarding. And every place we go, we do some games. We leave skateboards. And you know what Mexico has in every single town? A covered basketball court. And there, it's because of the sun. It's so hot. And in BC, it's getting hotter and hotter. And so it's not only really for the rain, but also in those really, really hot months, it's shade. And so if Mexico can do it, then I think we can too. And if you go to Cloverdale, one of the benefits to covering a skate park is that the acidity of the rain, it destroys the concrete. And over time, that new concrete gets hard and really to fall on for kids becomes harder and harder. If you go to Cloverdale today, and if you go to the skate park and you go to the portion of the skate park that's covered, you guys know the Cloverdale skate park, of course. If you go to the covered section, you'll notice a difference between the concrete that's covered versus the concrete that's been exposed. The concrete that's been covered still looks brand new. And so by covering our skate parks, whether they are existing skate parks, by building covers over them, or taking a look at our cities and seeing where there's bridges or possibly some places where there's already covered, but there's nothing there. And I understand those spaces many times are complicated spaces. There's right-of-way passages. There's maybe businesses who have no youth interests that own those spaces. But there are places in North America and across the world that have been able to leverage bridges and those kind of spaces that already have cover to build those places. And I've spoken to Pitt Meadows. The Golden Ears Bridge has acreage and acreage of covered land from the Golden Ears Bridge. These kind of spaces should be used. They're sitting empty. Coquitlam has the same. It's got hectares of land right by Coquitlam Center, by Mariner Pass, and it's sitting empty. So it's I feel in many ways commissioned by the skateboard community to go into spaces like this and talk to people of influence and say, guys, we need to figure something out. We live in, again, the rainiest climate in North America, and we need more spaces and places for our youth to use year-round. In order to create athletes to compete at an Olympic level, we need to do this because right now we're losing professionals to southern regions to be able to practice. So if you notice, most Canadian pros, they live south of the border. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm open to having a conversation and answering any questions you may have.
There are some questions from council. Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and thanks very much for coming today. You sort of briefly touched on some of the other communities that you've been in conversation with. Can you just sort of highlight any of the progress that's been made in other jurisdictions in the Lower Mainland? Yeah,
that's a great point. So Port Moody right now is in its 10-year plan of renovating Rocky Point Park, and the skate park there is definitely at its end of life. And so within 2 to 3 years, the city of Port Moody has agreed that they're going to do a new skate park with either a partial or full cover. So Port Moody has said yes, that they're going to be building a cover over the skate park. As to the percentage of how much the park is covered, I'm hoping for full, but we'll see. Port Coquitlam, we did something similar to this in Poco. They are wanting to take an old bike park off of Shaughnessy, and what they're going to do is this is not 100%, but they're looking to make a covered lacrosse box, and then in the periphery of the lacrosse box, create some skate spots around the cover. And so a couple bars and some obstacles there. So not a full skate park, but just something during that rainy season. And I think that would mitigate a lot of the problems and issues that we have. If every city created skate spots, that were covered, that would be a great thing. The city of Poco heard our need we're also into maintaining existing parks, and so the city of Poco resurfaced Railside Skate Park at the cost of $250,000 and added new features, and that was a really, really wonderful thing. They took an old skate park which needed some love, and now that skate park is used tremendously, and which has led to other municipalities like Abbotsford taking McMillan Park and also resurfacing. They're starting the resurfacing before Christmas, being motivated by Poco. And as important resurfacing is, and I love to talk about resurfacing, and skate parks need to be maintained. I think that's kind of a given. You spend $1.6 million on a skate park, you'd think in 15, 20 years, you'd probably want to resurface it. I'm passionate about that, but my main number one priority right now is to really advocate for covered spaces, because we're about to go into another winter, And the only places where people have to skate are West 49 Skate Park, which is Tawasin Mills, which is a heck of a drive. It's $15. And again, for a kid who wants to skate a couple times a week, to drive all the way there, plus $15. And they're only open Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, not open throughout the week. Then you got Cloverdale. That is really one of the only places that has a cover, and that's amazing that Surrey did that. And then what you have is Plaza, which is underneath the Georgia Viaduct. However, because of the height of the Georgia Viaduct, that wind carries that rain pretty good, and it gets pretty soaked. So what we're looking at is another winter in parkades, which just isn't good enough. So it's kind of a given. It's like, hey, this is a recreational void that I think every municipality has, even Surrey, because the size of Surrey, for them to have just Cloverdale. And then there's another skate park, I forget the name, right by the SkyTrain. Chuck Bailey, thank you. But that bowl gets covered in leaves, and you see more street skaters than you see bowl skaters. And so that's the progress we've made, which isn't really much. 5 years of doing it. I've been doing this since 2019. And a lot of the time, I think it's because of the cost of the cover. Many times people go, oh, they're willing to build the skate park, and then it goes, hey, we need another $500,000 or whatever. I think it depends on our expectations. Cloverdale has a beautiful cover. My goodness, it's got the LED lights, it's all wood, and it's really beautiful. But we don't need something that fancy. It just needs to cover it. In Mexico, to reference them again, they have literally the same cover. It must have been the same company that went around and did every municipality, because it's got the same arch, it's steel archways with, in their case, I think it's tin or something like that. But that's the progress we've made, and it's something. I know it's a long haul, and I'm going to keep doing this until cities catch the vision that it's not only just for skateboarders too. As a parent, there's not a lot of places for me to bring my kids. The mall, and then paying $20 per kid at a place kind of like Oh My Land Club or Crash Crawlies or something like that. So I just think that we live in one of the rainiest places on the planet, and we need to create more spaces that are dry. It's really that simple, and include skate parks in there because skaters need it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And one thing that maybe people don't know is, why don't skaters skate in the rain? A couple of reasons. It destroys the laminate of the wood. The wood just doesn't, it kind of gets waterlogged. The bearings get rusty. It's not good for it. And it's also dangerous. I've seen kids skate in the rain and twist their knees because it's slippery. And so you have more of an increased chance of injury. So.
Great. Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, thanks for coming. As a parent of a kid who skateboarded a lot and whose husband decided to put a half pipe in the basement, and we had half the neighborhood kids over there.
So where's that? What's that address?
A disaster. It was so loud. Anyway, but super fun for the kids. So I totally understand, because I think parents just want a safe place for their kids to go. I guess my question too, because it's been a long time since I've met skateboarders, so I'm just kind of wondering how many kids are skateboarding these days. And I know there's scooters and all that kind of stuff, but do you have any stats, maybe even for the township of the amount of kids?
I couldn't tell you like stats, but what I can tell you is that what the pandemic did is it increased the amount of individual sports. That is to say, scooters, skateboarders, because of the team aspect being, we couldn't play team sports. We saw bicycling, skateboarding, scootering go up a lot. And so I've seen an increase in skateboarding. I've been skateboarding for 24 years, and I've seen ebbs and flows where skateboarding is really cool.
Right.
And then I've seen the valley of the shadow of death where skateboarding is no longer cool, right?
Yeah.
You're just pushing that wood thing, And now that it's an Olympic sport and really taken a lot more seriously, and I think that some of the stigma around skateboarders is becoming less and less. You're seeing older and older people pick up skateboarding as well. And so I would say that it's increasing. I've also heard this, now I have nothing to back it, but that skate parks are one of the greatest investments when it comes to usage. Mm-hmm. You're gonna get a lot of usage out of it because you're gonna have a lot of different groups of people using the skate park, right? And so whether it's bicycles, skateboards, scooters, even not preferable, but you see people using their RC cars and coming and hanging
Right,
out
yeah.
there. You know,
true.
I was at the skate park this morning and at Poco and with some friends, and there were people who were just hanging out there, just coming to. One guy, you know, was on his lunch break, and he came to just hang out.
Okay, well, that's great. Thanks, and thanks for advocating for this.
Yeah, no problem.
I did want to mention that we're all so inspired by Port Coquitlam, but there are potholes there.
This is
And,
true. Yeah.
Just want to mention that.
Yes.
But if you have pictures of that, maybe not all members of council have a chance
I'd love
to go to some of the destinations that you're referencing. If you could follow up with photographs of some of the examples that you're talking about. I think we're all familiar with the Cloverdale example. And if Port Coquitlam can afford it, certainly the township can. Councillor Bailey, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I was wondering why you weren't mentioning Chuck Bailey, because I am familiar with that one. What's your opinion of that one? Because you know Hippie Mike.
Oh, of course, I know Mike very well. Yeah.
Okay, and
yeah.
so do I. And I know he was involved in getting the cover over that one in Chuck Bailey. What's that one like?
Yeah, so I think the philosophy at the time was let's do one street and let's do one vert. Okay, so vert being when you're skating that curvature, you know, when you're skating half pipes and stuff, that's considered vert. Street would be more rails, ledges, those kind of things, right? And so I think the philosophy was, hey, let's do one covered street spot and let's do one covered vert spot. And you'll see that the Cloverdale, the street spot, is far more used. And so I don't skate that style of skateboarding, but what I have heard is that leaves and stuff like that get into the bowl. Also, that neighborhood, that area is also very, very sketchy. And so I've heard from people that it's not very used.
So would you be able to provide us with some ones, no matter where they are, that are really good examples, you know, so you can skip the process of trying to find them? With people in the know sometimes can shorten that. I love the idea of this because a big deal for me is kids that are in families with economic hardship right now have very limited opportunities for sport. Yes. And I know skateboarding is one of those, same with like BMX riding and that. And so I thanks for coming. This is something that I love, especially when you're going to put it near a covered lacrosse box. And thank you for not calling it a multi-sport box.
No
Thank
problem.
you.
Councillor Ferguson?
I like multi-sport box. Anyway, David, Mr. Johnson, thank you for coming. You know, it's funny. I used to teach, it's hard to believe, I just retired now. And we had a skateboard park right where I taught, right beside it. So I always knew where the kids were.
Sure, of course.
And you know what we used to do for recreation? It's 1 o'clock recreation time, everybody headed over to the skateboard park. And they not only they ate their lunch there, and one of the kids was actually got carded or sponsored, and I'm not sure if he was letting other kids use his board or maybe giving them away or something or whatever, but there's a lot of that. Some of the kids just like to ride their bikes around there. I know that you don't want the two running each other. They ride their BMX bikes or whatever, any type of bike they're running around. So it's a great sport. A number of years ago, I'm not sure, is Langley locally home or where's local for you?
No, I live in Anmore in Port Moody.
Okay, well, that's Anmore is a beautiful area. All my colleagues there, I always tell them how much I like it there. Is the interesting is I'm a Rotarian. We used to sponsor other things. So going seeing people like Lions, Rotarians, going out to your sponsors, going to people that just want to help out. That's another avenue. It's a great opportunity that you're doing. I love what you're doing, especially for kids. And it's a good hangout spot, but hopefully a clean out hangout spot where people. But you know, going back. And now I want to do a bit of history, and I got less than a few seconds. Is at Langley Township, we put a lot of skateboard parks out. And all of our major, Aldergrove, Fort Langley, Walnut Grove, Murrayville, the city, you know, Brookswood, there's a lot of them in our community. And one of the things that's said by one of my colleagues way back said, well, this sport's not going to last. Well, you and others are proof that it has lasted. And let's hopefully we can work together as a group to make this happen. But thank you for coming today.
Thanks for having me.
That's all the questions from council. Again, thank you for coming forward today.
Thank you so
Don't
much.
hesitate to keep in touch with me about any suggestions. All members of council, as Councillor Bailey referenced, anything you can follow up with specific examples, because some of the things I've heard is some concern about the risk of building a skateboard park that the students and the youth don't want to use. And then adding a cover to it increases the risk and the cost of the capital project that maybe won't be successful. So any suggestions specifically to what is popular and what makes sense would be helpful.
Yeah, I'd love to be of any consult there.
Okay, great.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Reports to council, item E1, Agricultural Land Commission application number 100456. Does anybody wish to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Rent, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any discussion on E1? Seeing none, call the question on E1. That carries unanimously. Item E2, telecommunications tower application 000011. Does anybody wish to move A or B? If there's a desire to approve it, A is probably appropriate. Councillor Pratt is moving A, seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on A? None. Call the question on E2A. That carries unanimously. Item E3, official community plan, update terms of reference. There's a recommendation to endorse the terms of reference. I will move that, seconded by Councillor Rent. I will also, seeing no speakers, move deferral to October 21st, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Is there any discussion on deferral? Seeing none, call the question on E3, deferral. That carries unanimously. Item E4, Langley Regional Airport Governance Review Terms of Reference, moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion on E4? Seeing none, call the question on E4. Councillor Bailey? That carries unanimously. Item E5, Langley Regional Airport 2045 Terms of Reference Endorsement, moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion on E5? Seeing none, call the question on E5. And that carries unanimously. Item E6, Housing Accelerator Fund, second 2.0 application. Is there any wish to move that? Moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on E6? Seeing none, call the question on E6. Councillor Ferguson? Nope, that's fine. Carries unanimously. Item E7, 2024 Province of BC Disaster Resilience and Innovation Funding Program. I'll move it. Seconded by Councillor Rint. Is there any discussion on E7? I'll call the question on E7. That carries unanimously. Item E8, capital request lane closure north of 80th at 212th Street. I'll move it. Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say thanks to staff for getting us an interim measure. I'm assuming we're moving option 3, closing the lane with future plans to have a more permanent solution with development. So appreciate that, and the residents can have some peace of mind.
Great. Yeah, appreciate that and concur. That's an easy one for me. Seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on E8. That carries unanimously. Item E9, capital request Smith Neighborhood Detention and Associated Works. I'll move it. Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion on E9? Councillor Ferguson.
Yes, thank you. I may through chair to staff. We've got some major projects going, this one and the next one. Have you got an anticipated start finish for some of these projects, if I may?
Their Worship to Councillor Ferguson, yeah, I believe in the report itself, we're anticipating to tender October 24th, 2024, and then construction start date would be January 2nd with substantial performance done by August 30th, 2025.
Yeah, supplemental question. Do you have to find stick handle through dates for fisheries and birding seasons, if I may?
In the event those approvals are required, we would then liaison or coordinate with our counterparts at the ministry to ensure that we meet those deadlines.
Thank you. Yeah.
Councillor Kunst?
So is this a new pond that wasn't anticipated, or was this something always in the plan? And then my subsequent question is, how does this impact the sort of the lower Smith Crescent, Milner area?
Mr. Cooner?
To your worship, to Councillor Kuntz, council has approved to proceed with the design of this pond. Now we're bringing forward the funding source and the approval of construction for this pond. And the second question, I wanted just a further clarification. Is that in relation to some of the lands that are on the south sides of the Smith East, or is there specific lands you're referring to that are not caught in the catchment?
So down the hill from, I guess it would be Smith Crescent and Crush Crescent, and then Glover Road is sort of running like adjacent to 216th and 208th. That area there, so it's the lower area, and I know that there have been some concerns about if development occurs, what's going to happen to those lower areas. So I guess this new pond, I thought that there was only one pond, but I guess there's 7B connecting to 7A.
To your worship, to Councillor Kuntz, that is correct. So Pond 7A is connecting to 7B. From Pond 7B, there will be a new storm sewer that's going to go to North Creek. And to Pond 7B, that new storm sewer, in the event some of the properties can connect to that, there will be that option.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Pratt?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through yourself to staff, just a question in regards to the connection between Tank 7A and Pond 7B. In the Smith plan that we've approved most recently, it shows a creek along the 209A right-of-way. And I'm just wondering, in the design of this storm sewer, are we anticipating it being piped and culverted underground, or is this going to sort of be an enhanced and rehabbed creek that we can see along 209A or in potentially 210, something like that?
Dear Worship, to Councillor Pratt, 209A Street is anticipated to probably require further environmental review, as Pond 7B may encroach on the Class B ditch that I believe, are referring to. So there will be some further review that's going to anticipated prior to beginning construction.
Okay, thank you. I guess the follow-up question then is, it's more in regards to just the actual sort of what the type of storm sewer connection that we're looking at. Is it just going to be your traditional storm pipe, or is the creek or rehab creek going to serve as a, for an example, on 206th Street by the Wilby Town Center, we sort of rebuilt a connection for Yorkson Creek to get to the pond and to get into the creek further from there. Is this going to be a traditional storm sewer underground, or is this going to be an above ground sort of creek?
To your worship, to Councillor Pratt, I think staff will be reviewing both options and seeing what approvals might be required. So I think we still have the flexibility at this time. Unless, Mr. Rule, can you just confirm if we've committed to any specific direction for this item?
Currently, the design we're working on is a piped connection between 7A and 7B.
Okay, thank you very much.
Seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on E9. That carries unanimously. Item E10, Smith Neighborhood Roadworks. I'll move it. Seconded by Councillor Rint. Is there any discussion on E10? Seeing none, I'll call the question on E10. That carries unanimously. Bylaws for first and second reading, G1, 212 Civic Infrastructure Loan Authorization Bylaw number 6054. I'll move it. Seconded by Councillor Rint. Is there any discussion on G1? That's correct. Call the question on G1. That carries unanimously. G2, 208A Civic Infrastructure Loan Authorization Bylaw number 6053. I'll move it. Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion on G2? Seeing none, call the question on G2. That carries unanimously. G3, Smith Neighborhood Stormworks Loan Authorization Bylaw number 6052. I'll move it, seconded by Councillor Rint. I'd also like to move an amendment to set the maximum amortization at 25 years. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Rint. Is there any discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, call the question on the amendment to G3. That carries unanimously. Now back to the main motion as amended. Seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on G3 as amended. That carries unanimously. Bylaws for first, second, third reading and final adoption. I'll move it. Seconded by Councillor Rint. Councillor Ferguson, I think I'm going to move deferral to October 7th, 2027. Seconded, is there a second? There's seconded by Councillor Rint. So, sorry, October 7th, 2024. There's a typo here, 2 sevens. So on deferral, I think Council has now received upwards of over 30 submissions to this, so I think a deferral to consider the input is appropriate. And because of UBCM, I determined that maybe we wouldn't be as available next week as we would be otherwise. So I think 2 meetings would be appropriate to give everyone plenty of time to meet who they'd like to meet and consider the issues at that location. So that's the logic for 2-meeting deferral, UBCM. Councillor Kunst.
Yeah, I just had a question, and I don't know, I just want to make sure that according to the distance from the daycare to, there's a cannabis shop, and I believe it's 350 meters away, and I'm just curious as to what our policy is around where the daycare is as opposed to, because I remember that there's a little bit of a bubble where we can't have a daycare close to a cannabis shop. But I don't know if they're outside of that. So it's, I mean, we have a couple weeks or a couple meetings to figure that out, but I just wanted to raise it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I never thought about that. Thank you. Thank Councillor Coons for bringing. Yeah, I also we're also getting questions asked by individual, either email or phone calls or otherwise, regarding the best placement and also a better things like parking things. So I certainly support that, and anyway, that I support what we're going to end up doing.
So call the question on deferral, H1. That carries unanimously. Bylaws for consideration of third reading and final adoption. Williams Neighborhood Plan Update, bylaw number 5799. Now, Ms. Bauer, I'm going to move the third reading only. So is there a seconder to third reading? Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any discussion? Okay, I have a couple of amendments. Ms. Bauer, if you could bring up the amendments one at a time, please. Right, there's the first one. I will move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Rent. This was requested by the school district. Okay, great. Is there any other discussion on this? This is unrelated. I believe there's some concern here about how this plan has sat for 6 years. As completed by council in 2018, the development industry has been unable to advance itself for a number of reasons, which are very interesting. However, the school district requested this given the potential for that to continue for another 5 to 10 years. Is there any other discussion on this? Nope, that's great. Call a question on this amendment. B1. That carries unanimously. Ms. Bauer, the second amendment? Great, so I will move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Rent.
I don't have it either.
It's a new system we're trying out, so it would certainly slow things down. Everyone will get a chance to read them. I called them televisions, and I was immediately corrected. Those are not televisions. But there has been some upgrades to the theater. This was requested during a written submission and some discussions, and this was based upon providing some flexibility for design. If people wish to read it a few times, it's no problem. Just, if anybody has any questions? Councillor Kunst.
Is this in addition to, or is this replacing something, or are we amending something? Because it's hard for me to sort of pull out exactly where
Yeah,
this
so
belongs in
this
the
is
update.
replacing it. So Mr. Cooner, I don't know if you want to explain what's being replaced. So rather than amend it, what you don't have in front of you, this is replacing that section, and it's updating for flexibility. Mr. Cooner, I'm happy to have staff come to the front to answer the question. Make sure everybody fully understands what they're voting on. Go ahead.
Your Worship, to Councillor Kunz, that's correct. So policy 3 is being replaced in order to allow active solar building design and applications of solar panels. So essentially this was requested, I believe, by written submissions and few proponents, that this gives flexibility to some of the developers when it comes to 6-story wood frame buildings being developed in the Williams Neighborhood Plan.
Thank you.
Right, so seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on this amendment. That carries unanimously. Ms. Bauer, I believe there's 2 more. Yep, so I'll move that. Seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion, questions? No. This is an addition. That's been moved and seconded. I believe, Ms. Bauer, it's been moved and seconded. That's correct. Yeah, it's on the floor. Any discussion? No? Seeing none, I'll call the question on that 3rd amendment. That carries. The Councillor Kunst opposed. Ms. Bauer, there's a 4th one. I'll move that. Seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any questions or discussion? Oh, Councillor Kunst, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering how long you've had the amendments and if maybe we could have received them a day ago.
Yeah, I believe they're of a minor nature, amending a bylaw, discretion of the chair. They're on the floor, moved and seconded.
Okay. I'd just be nice to have had this yesterday. Thanks.
Great. Not seeing any other discussion, I'll call the question on I-1 amendment. That carries. Councillor Kunst opposed. Is there any other discussion on the Williams Neighborhood Plan 3rd reading as amended? Great. Seeing none, I'll call the question on I-1 as amended. That carries. Councillor Kunst opposed. J1, bylaws for final adoption, highway and traffic bylaw, bylaw notice enforcement bylaw amendments, commercial vehicle program, bylaw number 6029-6030. I'll move it. Seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on J1? Seeing none, call the question on J1. That carries unanimously. J2, temporary borrowing bylaws, bylaw number 6035, 6036, 6037, 6038. I'll move them, seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion on J2? Seeing none, call the question on J2. That carries unanimously. J3, 2024 development cost charges amendment, bylaw number 6024, moved by Councillor Rint, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any discussion on J3? Seeing none, call the question on J3. That carries unanimously. J4, strategic loan authorization bylaw, bylaw number 6011, moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Rint. Is there any discussion on J4? Seeing none, call the question on J4. That carries unanimously. Items from prior meetings, K1, 200 Street 2040. This was deferred, Ms. Bauer, so it's back on the floor, is that correct? So make sure that I've,
It has been moved and
yeah,
seconded,
so
yes.
it's back on the floor, just from the deferral. So I've got a referral motion. Any discussion on 200 Street 2040? But I do have a referral motion back to staff. But if anybody wishes to make comments or ask any questions before those referrals, Councillor Pratt.
It's only that I have a couple of additions, so perhaps then we'll just amend any referral to add them if that's.
That would be the procedure. So there's a referral motion if you wish to add to it for other parameters. Any member of council wishes to add to a referral, we can debate those elements of the referral. Seeing no other speakers, Ms. Bauer, could you bring up that referral, please? The 200 Street 2040 be referred back to staff to remove a couple of sections that I think are, probably not going to stand the test of time, as similar to the rest of the document. Item 2 is to align the proposed locations for bus rapid transit station locations with TransLink, including confirming one at 200 Street and 86th Avenue. Number 3, align the renderings and land uses proposed with existing conditions not to be expected to be the subject of redevelopment before 2040. And reduce the proposed densities to include a greater variety of housing types, especially beyond 400 meters of 200 Street. I'll move that referral, seconded by Councillor Rent. Now, we can move division if anybody wishes to do that. I'm happy to support division. If anybody wishes to vote on them separately. Item number 2, there have been some discussions with TransLink to determine where BRT stations go. I think it'd be appropriate to have this document aligned with the direction that they're going. And I believe that there's still some minor work to do in that area. I don't know why personally, just my opinion, I don't know why we're showing renderings of redeveloping sites that I don't think anybody's expecting will be redeveloped by 2040. Let's not show a fantasy, let's show the real world. So I'd like to just have aligned the land uses and renderings with what is realistically going to occur within that 15 year. I can't believe 2040 is only 15 years away, but within that 15-year time frame. Clearly, some of the sites that are showing high-rise development are not going to be redeveloped within 15 years. And then to review and head in the direction of reducing proposed densities. I do not believe that every lot within 800 meters of 200 Street should be condo. It's just my opinion, and that's why the referral is here for council to consider. If anybody wishes to move division, like I said, and vote differently on any of the 4, happy to support that. Any questions on the referral? Any discussion on the referral? Any amendments to the referral? Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just looking at item number 4. Is that going to provide, I suppose anybody could come in if they decide they want to build condos. That would be up to the council of the day to decide if they were to say they wanted something additionally. So
I believe that would end up as bonus density rather than a baseline density designation.
Okay. So I have 2 amendments, I suppose, to this referral, if that's the way we want to do it. I did provide them to the clerk.
If you've provided them to the clerk, Ms. Bauer, can you do you want to do one at a time?
Sure. Yeah, I think they're relatively simple. Amendment 1 would be to include commercial on 76th Avenue between 200 and 201 streets.
Is there a seconder to that? I'll second it. Go ahead.
The reality with that one is that we have commercial currently on the west side of 76th Avenue there, currently almost completion on the Hayar Town Center. And then there are proposed commercial uses on the southwest side. So this would simply add some commercial use frontage on the east side of 200 Street as well to create a node there.
Any further discussion on
if we're just
that
doing
amendment?
that one, we'll leave it there.
Any other discussion on that amendment to the referral? Seeing none, I'll call the question on that amendment to the referral on K1. Councillor Ferguson?
Yes. It's working now.
That carries unanimously. You had a second one, Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, similar to, I suppose, your comments in regards to what we're realistically going to see in terms of redevelopment up towards sort of the gateway node of this. Along 72, there are several institutionally zoned properties, churches that I don't anticipate will be redeveloped in the near to medium term that are shown as active commercial frontages in the plan. And I just think that...
So let's, is there a seconder to this amendment of the referral? Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that the reality is that I just want to be able to show people what they can realistically anticipate between now and 2040. And since the Orthodox Church just built a new one, I don't think we'll be seeing a commercial frontage there anytime soon.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, I'm just looking at this, reading it now. Is an institutional, that's churches, but what about existing business? Would they be grandfathered, if I may? I guess you'd have to figure that one out.
Well, there's no...
There was no, what you're right now, you're talking about existing churches, right? Institutional churches?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, but that, because being up in that area an awful lot, I see an awful lot of commercial that are grandfathered. I'm sure some may be gone by in 40 or in 20 or 15 years. Anyway, that's all I want to know. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Seeing no other discussion, call the question on that amendment. That carries unanimously. Back to the referral as amended. Any other discussion on the referral? Seeing none, call the question on the referral. That carries unanimously. K2, this was moved reconsideration. Ms. Bauer, did I meet the deadline to not require a vote on reconsideration? I believe I did.
Yes, you did.
Yes, I did. So it's back on the floor. I will move it. Seconded by Councillor Rint. Is there any discussion on K2? This would be moving the original motion without the amendments. Is there any other discussion on K2 as not amended? I'll call the question on K2. That carries unanimously. Mayor and Council report. Does anybody wish to make a report? The cruise-in was fabulous on Saturday. Saw a few of you there. I think that was great. I had a ride along the night before, which I did post a bit about on social media with the RCMP. Saw firsthand some of the issues. I certainly can see both sides of it, where there's a number of car enthusiasts which are causing no issues, but there are a few that certainly wish to use public streets for purposes they're not intended for. So leave it at that. With significant crowds that last year did get out of hand. But it was good to see firsthand the RCMP there primarily to keep members of the public safe, not disrupt people. But other than that, that's what occurred here in the last couple of weeks. Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, I just would like to bring up that in 2 days, 2001 was 9/11, and it significantly changed everything for an awful lot of people, especially in North America, but especially in the community I come from, the firefighters. And in recognition of this, as 23 years later, people tend to forget. And they forget to remember what happened on that day. And as part of the remembrance, there will be a ride that will start at the Cascades Casino right by the Dees Tunnel. And it will end at Peace Arch, where both American and Canadian motorcycle riders, car guys, and especially an awful lot of first responders will be remembering 9/11. So just please keep that in your mind. It is open if anyone wants to come and view it. Yeah, it's very, very near and dear to some of our hearts.
Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And yeah, I echo those comments about the cruise-in. Really well-attended event, but I just wanted to give a shout-out and some love to the organizers of Willoughby Days at the same time. They had a wonderful event out there. Great to see so many people enjoying the town center and creating a little bit of community in Willoughby that is a newer neighborhood. So,
Councillor Ferguson?
Oh, yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's funny, and now we're back from our summer break. You look at what has been accomplished through the summer. Langley is a very vibrant place. We had, of course, the Aldergrove Community Fair, and a lot of people attended with bands and other things, and a showcase for the community. We have little things like there's a competitive kind of a drink and lemonade stand at 272nd and Fraser Highway, put on by the Aldergrove Business Association. They had a number of other events throughout the community at McLeod Athletic Park, and of course, every Thursday night, rain attending, is they had a group of people, professional musicians, singing and dancing and performing to the Willoughby community as well. There's been many barbecues and events throughout Langley. It's a vibrant community, and of course, I attended the cruising as well, and it's exciting to see all those folks, young and old, participate in many events at the cruise-in. It's not just for people that drive, but for people like to look and see what people have done with these cars that are, some of them are almost 100 years old. Also, I wanted, Mr. Mayor, to say that I had the privilege, on my own dime, of course, so it's not going to be in the news, supported by the community, but I had the opportunity of going to the Olympics this year in Paris. And a person from the community was born in Langley, Zachary Clay. He attended preschool at Sunshine School in South Langley. He attended Langley Fundamental School along with his brothers, and the family were involved with many events. I was wondering if you could send him and any others that participated at the Olympics this year, both Olympics or Paralympics. I know we will put a shout out to them with a little certificate or something on behalf of Mayor and Council, whether we're able to do that. And other than that, it was a great event. Paris Olympics was it was wonderful. The city of Paris did an excellent job. I did talk to the representatives, the ambassador's office for Canada. Ambassador Stéphane Dion and his staff also put on an event on behalf of Canada. So Canada was well represented, and very proud to be a Canadian at the Olympics. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, I just want to thank the township staff for the really great golf tournament I attended on the weekend in support of a really great cause called Kids Sport. So yeah, I worked with a lot of kids who benefited from that organization. So I just wanted to just say thank you for, it's a great organization to support. Thanks.
Anybody wish to make a regional report of any kind? No? Okay, so move on. Items for information 1 through 3. Any questions? Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just pulling it up right now. There we go. Yes, for 03, the speed humps, I just wanted to thank staff for their work in communicating with the BC Ambulance Service and working on to try and find a reasonable conclusion to this and move forward to make sure our streets are safe, but that everybody who needs to get to where they get to safely can do so.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And also appreciate taking some time with it and doing some fact finding rather than, perceptions. I think it's good to verify. Trust but verify, as Ronald Reagan would used to say, specifically around people that aren't with BC Ambulance, speaking for BC Ambulance. So I think it's great to reach the people that make the decisions at BC Ambulance, get their opinions. It's great to see that process here. I actually received an email directly to my inbox, which I believe should have gone to all of council, thanking and appreciating this council for the traffic calming measures at that school this week as they're back to school. So there are two sides to it. I know some people don't like them, but my perception is a lot of people do like them and appreciate the efforts to try to keep students safe. And I think we'll continue to look at it as the memo outlines and to some potential modifications if it goes in that direction. But I think it's important that the process was followed to review them, assess the allegations or suggestions made about this opinion or that opinion from BC Ambulance, and it was great to get that verified. Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, and I have to stress here, this is a really good example of when you go and talk to the people who are actually involved in it, and the adaptation to the speed, the compressed ones, that will help out with the wear and tear on the engines. I think this is great, and the staff did an excellent job on this to adapt this so it's still useful and still safe. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, seeing no other discussion on 01 to 3, move on to Q1, other business, Township of Langley MFA debt redemptions for 2025-2026. I'll move it, seconded by Councillor Rind. Did have some conversations with staff about the option for council to consider prematurely redeeming some of the smaller debt numbers that are using some funding sources that I believe have the ability to redeem early. This is itemized here for council to endorse this, but this would end up in the budget bylaw, but for council to endorse this for the conversation with MFA to be finalized. Councillor Van Popta, go ahead.
Yeah, I was happy to see this. Any way that we can reduce that load and shift things around, I think has been a good initiative. Even if some of it's pretty small in terms of numbers, anything helps. So I like seeing work like that.
This is transitioning some of the property tax being supported by universal services over to and replaced by other sources. So it's a good transition. I think it's very common sense, and I think we could have done more. However, there are challenges with MFA in regards to some of their policies, which I do believe need to be reformed. May work on that, but for the moment, this was achievable. So with that, I'll call the question on Q1. That carries unanimously. Councillor Bailey. You have a notice of motion under Q2.
Yes, Q2, I'd like to move Q2.
I'll second it. Is there any discussion on Q2? Go ahead, Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, and I just want to speak to the fact that if it binds anyone, it's really going to bind me a lot. But I think it's important on keeping the integrity of our staff, and that's in many different levels. That's police, fire, and all the staff, and not putting them in a position that could be compromising to their careers or their future careers. So that's why I'm putting this forward, to make sure that we clean up certain processes and ways of looking at elected officials.
Thank you. Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, so as I read this, not against it, I'm just thinking that it kind of opens a bit of a can of worms, because RCMP detachment members, well, you could easily get a picture of yourself with somebody that doesn't work in Langley. So how does this get, how is this monitored, or is this more, self-monitoring? I guess this is just, it says here, unless express written permission is obtained from the individuals prior to. So you have to ask for permission before you get a picture taken, or that's in political campaigning or campaigning that you pay for, or is it simply just on your Facebook or on your social media?
So the way I read it, I draw specific attention to in paid political advertising. So I believe that would be taking someone's photo in uniform was one example, and running a paid political ad throughout the entire township of Langley, which I believe could be interpreted as a political endorsement. So I believe it's very specific within paid political advertising, not within social media. Generally.
Is this a Langley council thing, or is this like sort of across the board? Do we see this in other municipalities, or does BC Elections have anything to say about this? Is this sort of, yeah?
Mr. Cooner?
To your worship, to Councillor Kunst, the Code of Ethics, Conduct and Confidentiality varies between each municipality. It's a self-governing item. Some municipalities do have a different mechanism of dealing with these items. Election BC is a separate legislation that will deal with specifically during candidates when they're during the writ period. So this would be a separate item. I don't know off the top of my head whether there's one exactly identical to the one being proposed to date, but there is certain variations.
Okay, I guess the question I have is, if someone gets a letter on council to be in a paid political advertising and the other councillor can't get a letter, I mean, I don't know where this is, sort of where this came from. So I'm just not sure how we manage this, and how we monitor that. Do we ask for people to prove that they got a letter? Is that sort of how that works?
I believe it would be a complaint-driven process, Mr. Cooner. Would that be correct?
Yes, Your Worship. So it'd be complaint-driven, and then it would be council's prerogative to consider the matter, and it would be more of a self-governance item.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, seeing no discussion, I'll call the question on Q2. That carries. Councillor Kuntz opposed. Councillor Bailey, go ahead. You have a third most motion.
Yeah, I'm
Or sorry,
Trying to-
Q3.
trying to find it here. And I can't find it. It's not on my screen. Yes. I'd like to move Q3.
Seconded. That's seconded by Councillor Rent.
Yeah, I just think, one, personally, I'm a big fan. I grew up around rodeos and that. And the fact that our rodeo, and this is the third year of it, didn't receive the money from the provincial governments. And it is a very unfortunate thing that people view rodeos as being mean-spirited or dangerous to animals, when I know that, because some family has been involved in it, that they take extreme care of these animals because a lot of them are worth a small fortune. And since we're viewed as the horse capital of British Columbia, I think that the stampede fits into our culture. And if you go and attend, I attended 2 out of the 3 days there. Everyone has a wonderful time there. There's no problems on site, and in fact, I had some people come up and talk to me that they feel that this may get much bigger, and that this site might, for the limited time in the future, will serve, but they think it'll outgrow it. And I think drawing people to Langley, things like this show that we're maintaining part of our culture. And rodeos are part of the culture of this area. I moved in this area in 1960, and I can remember going and watching my very first Cloverdale rodeo, and many since then, including 2 years ago when my granddaughter was a mutton buster. So I definitely would like to support to make sure that this entity can continue to move forward as it has for the last 3 years, and by helping them out with some funding due to a loss of grants.
Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I guess my only question is, do we know why they were not able to receive provincial funding this year?
Mr. Cooner, do you? I think I spoke briefly with them that they had made a grant application which was not successful. There's various theories of why that is. Mr. Cooner, do you have any additional information?
Your Worship, that's staff's understanding at this time that the application was submitted and they were unsuccessful. There's a variety of organizations that were unsuccessful. Usually the reasons specifically are not given.
Do we know if there were other rodeos that were also unsuccessful in receiving grant funding?
No, I believe the Cloverdale Rodeo received approximately 150,000. I'm going off memory, maybe 140, maybe 160, but somewhere in that range with support for the Cloverdale event. And I believe, I'm trying to verify it, but I believe that there was a suggestion that this grant for this event was not successful due to a typo.
Interesting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on Q3? Seeing none, call the question on Q3. That carries unanimously. Does anybody have any items to add for special closed? No? Ms. Bauer, I have one legal item, actually 2 legal items, and 1 personnel. So that'd get a motion to resolve into special closed as amended, moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Rint. Any discussion? Call the question on R1. That carries unanimously. Get a motion to terminate. Moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Rint. All those in favor, opposed, and carried. Wow, that is what council meetings could look like. Hopefully that's what they look like from now on.